Um, so we'll get started, and I want to welcome you all for showing up. Thank you, and especially Jay Franklin of the County Assessment Office. I don't have much of an introduction to offer other than I know that he's been with the assessment office for quite a while, and on a personal planning front, he's also one of the promptest, quickest responders to emails that I've ever encountered, and that always makes things easier. So thank you for that, and welcome, Jay.
Well, thanks. And that just shows that I just procrastinate the work that I'm actually doing. So anything else that I could do different is something good. But thanks for having me. My name's Jay Franklin. I'm the director of assessment here in Tompkins County. We're a little unique in New York State. We have a county-wide assessment office. We consolidated that back in 1970. The county did a county charter vote back in 1968 to go to our current county legislature form of government. Prior to that, we had a board of supervisors. So all of the town supervisors would join together and they would kind of govern the county as well. But we changed to the board of representatives at that point. And one other thing that we did was brought all of the town assessment functions to the county level. And I have a little bit of history. I wasn't born then, but my father was the assessor for the town of Ithaca. And he was part of that consolidation effort. So I have some history there. But they took 22 part-time assessors, created 5 full-time individuals at that time, in order to provide a full-time professional appraisal staff for the county. So we had a lot of assessors who were elderly, who were retiring. They don't make assessors that often. I was only made because my father was in the business more or less and was looking for a job after college. But back then they had a hard time finding people. So they were able to take a bunch of part-time assessors and bring them in for a professional office. They only saved about, I think, $3,000 back then. But in this year, I estimate we save around $650,000 by having a consolidated assessment office, as opposed to every town having one. And, savings is one thing, but to me, it's the level of professionalism that you'll get. I always laugh when I meet with New York State assessors and I'll get their business card and it's the 4th Thursday of the month from 7 to 9 p.m. in their garage. That's not accessible. It just isn't. That's not serving the public. And that was one thing that I liked when I was waiting here. It was like meeting with a public servant. And that's really what we are. We are here to serve the public. Getting into more things, the work from home, the flexible work arrangements, it's hard to serve the public when you're working at home and the public's going to walk into your counter. We don't do work from home. It's just not, we can't do that. So we'll be here and we'll be here to serve the public. Myself, I've been, I was born here. I literally grew up in my office. I knew where everybody's candy was by the age of 3. So I would just come in and I knew where those juju hearts were. So I'm going to hit those up. But, right or wrong, this is my family office. It is a government office. It's not family and that kind of thing. But I do take a lot of pride in how this office was set up, how we do our job, and how we serve the public. Everything that we do here has that question is, how do we serve our public the best? And, if there's a conversation I can be in or get the word out, we're there to try to help. And it is the family business. I have an older brother who's a real estate appraiser on Long Island. He's the director of litigation for Cushman Wake. And his job is to fight the assessor down on Long Island. So it's kind of a good, good dynamic that we have. You know, we both sit on the other side of the table, but we both can kind of throw ideas off of each other. And, you know, that's one thing about an assessment. It's an art and a science. You know, when you go to buy a piece of property, you don't run your numbers through a formula in order to try to determine how much you want to buy for that property. You know, numbers will get you into the ballpark, but especially in today's market, we're seeing that the emotional appealness of a house is playing more than even, say, size of a house will play. You know, we have houses in the city of Ithaca, 1,400 square feet on Utica Street, 3 beds, 1 bathroom that sold for $520,000.
Jesus.
It's just, and when we talked to the listing agent, it showed very nice as an open floor plan. You know, I grew up right in Fall Creek, right on Cuga Street. I just can't see it. I loved living in the city. It was great being able to walk everywhere, but I don't know. But so that's kind of where we say where it's an art and a science. You know, numbers are going to get us there, but it's really the appraiser's experience who can take those numbers, interpolate what they're seeing in the market, and turn that around to an assessed value. So jumping back, really, you know, my job is here to value property so that the town, the county, and school can then levy taxes off of that. So, you know, that's kind of basically what we do. So our job is to simply determine what is the market value of all 36,000 parcels in the county. Whether it's Cornell, vacant land, office building, a house, we have to determine what is the most probable sale price between a buyer and a seller acting with undue influence and are willing to exchange in terms of dollars. That's kind of the legal definition. You know, we're not looking for that sucker who's going to come in and pay you $100,000 more. We're not looking for the estate sale that, you know, you just wanted to get rid of grandma's property, so you sold it to the first person that came in. You know, what is the most probable sale price? And the way that we do that is we look at what did other properties sell for. So it's the basic economic law of substitution. If you could buy an apple for $1, you're not going to go next door and buy an apple for $2 if it's the same Honeycrisp apple that you could have bought from the other store for $1. So that's kind of where we look at. We look at what happened in the marketplace and then what is the most probable sale price of that property. One thing we're not trying to do is guess into the future what's going to happen. So right now, we are in the process of finalizing our 2022 assessment roll. The 2022 assessment roll is based upon the economic conditions as of July 1 of 2021. So what were interest rates? How was the market? How was the demand? How was the supply of houses on the market as of that July 1 date? But we also wait until March 1 to see what's physically there on the property. I always tell people, if you're going to build a new house, build it on March 2nd. Don't do it on March 1st. If you have a house there as a March 1, it's going to be valued as a house for the full year. If you put it on March 2nd, you will be valued just as what was there as a March 1, so probably just that vacant land. You know, I, in somewhat jest, it's, you know, if you're going to have a fire, have your fire in March. I mean, in February. Don't have your fire in March. After that, it's because your improvement was there on March 1, we still have to value it according to it being there that year. So, you know, and I also say, if you have a question, call me in February, make me your Valentine's. But, you know, at least in February, we can help, and because one of our big days is March 1. So, you know, any physical improvement is there at March 1, but it's also who's the owner as of March 1, and did you apply for an exemption as of March 1? The last 2 years during COVID, we really didn't have a deadline for exemptions, but hopefully, knock on some wood, next year, I will get to see all of my seniors again coming into the office and reapplying for their exemptions. That's one thing I've missed during COVID. And one good part of my job is, just seeing everybody that does come into the office. As my dad worked here for 26 years. I've been here for 26 years. You kind of get to know everybody. And, at least during the winter, I don't go anywhere. The golf course isn't open. So I don't really see anybody. So this is kind of my opportunity to see all of my old friends. So it'll be good to do that. So in Tompkins County, we annually reassess properties to get them to 100% of their market value. What the law says is that we have to annually assess property at a uniform percentage of value. So if I were to reassess everyone at 50% of value, I could cut everyone's assessment in half. But what would happen is your tax rate would simply double and your taxes would be the same. Because the assessments were cut in half, Ithaca City School District doesn't all of a sudden need $50 million as opposed to the $100 million that they levy right now. So in order to get the $100 million they need to run the schools, they would just double that tax rate. So for me, a 100% level of assessment is so explainable. You can look at your assessment and say, can I sell my property for that? Nassau County values at 1/4 of 1%. My brother lives down there in the city of Glen Cove. He has one assessment for his city of Glen Cove purposes, and then he has one assessment from the county, and they are actually two different figures. So he has two assessors valuing his property for two different purposes and came up with two different answers. If that's not the definition of confusion, I don't know what it is. But his, $622 assessment translates into a $950,000 market value. I just don't understand it. When I don't get it. I've never been given a good answer as to why somebody would assess at a fractional value. It's more work for us. I was a math major at Binghamton. I can't figure out 3% of value unless I figure out 100% first and do more work to get there. So for us, we've been at 100% since 2000. I'll still be here at least for 6 more years. So hopefully we'll still be at 100%. And that's just so explainable. And another key thing is by doing annual reassessment, we're making sure that we have vertical equity is what it's called on our assessment roll. So it just means that we're treating higher price properties the same manner that lower price properties are treated. Typically, there's a tendency in appraisals to, it's hard to reach that outliers. It's hard to reach Mrs. Park's house that's on the market for $3.5 million. It's just, we don't have the data for it. But it's also harder to accurately assess the $200,000 house, that's in the north side. We don't have the sales of livable properties of that sort of value. So we kind of get everything into the middle. But at least by valuing each and every year, we can make sure that the properties that appreciate at a higher rate has their assessment reflected accordingly, and the properties that appreciate at a lower rate are not adjusted as high. And typically, the higher priced properties appreciate more. So if we were to not adjust assessments on a yearly basis, the higher priced properties would end up paying less in taxes, and they would, the lower priced properties would then shoulder that burden of the taxes that the higher priced properties would pay. We've seen so many reports of this in New York City, Long Island, really across the country, that you really don't think about, how systematic racism can really show its head in pretty much everything that we do. And even in annual reassessment program, you could see where that could come into play there. I don't want to be a part of that. So the annual reassessment is the most fairest way to distribute the tax burden that we have. And that's something that we will continue to do. Another thing my office does, we maintain tax maps. They're not survey quality. So when we do get a transfer or a survey that comes in, we try to accurately update those boundaries. But really, the only person that could tell you where your boundaries legally are is a judge. Typically, you would think would be done by a surveyor, but New York State is one of the states that doesn't have any fixed monuments for surveying purposes. If you have your deed and you look at it, most of the time it'll say at a point beginning in the intersection of North Cayuga Street and Lewis Street. Those streets kind of move every little bit. Another thing that we don't think about is magnetic north also changes. So if someone says go due north, you have to know what day they told you go due north on and find out where magnetic north is on that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really change things a lot, but every time I see a sale, the survey is a foot or so a little bit different, just based upon those kind of inaccuracies. So we try to do our best, but our tax maps there are just to describe properties so that we can levy taxes. Another key function that we do is administer any real property tax exemptions that the state authorizes. The county can't choose to offer an exemption unless the state does so. I have 11 and 12-year-old triplets at home. I don't have two sets of them. I have one child who was born on May 25th, and then my other two kids decided to wait till June 12th.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I have 18 days between my triplets' birth. We think it's a Guinness World Record, but if the county wanted to offer an exemption for someone who had a delayed birth of triplets, they couldn't do so because the state didn't authorize it. So the state has over 200 exemptions that they do authorize, from the Vienna Convention to the Public Housing Finance Law to the Real Property Tax Law. It's almost like I need to be a lawyer as well to try to go through these. But there's probably around 10 exemptions that are mainly administered here. We have the ag land exemption. Rather than your value being based upon the market value of that ag land, the state determines a value of how productive that ag land would be, and they get an exemption on that. There's the low income senior exemption. So for a senior is defined as over 65 years of age, and if they have an income under the scale as set by that taxing jurisdiction, which is typically, if your income is under 37,400, a senior could get a 5% break on their city, ICSD, and county taxes. If their income is under 29,000, they could get a 50% exemption. And that scale is about for every $1,000 increase in income from 29,000, it's a 5% change in exemption. So if your income was under 29, you get a 50%. Under 30, you get a 45%. And that scale will change to $900 difference as you get a little bit further up, but that kind of shows that gradient. And income for that purpose is defined as an adjusted gross income, but we add in any non-taxable Social Security income. We subtract out the Medicaid amount that's in your Social Security, and then we would also subtract out any IRA distributions that are in your income tax return. Or the other way that I say is if you think you're close to that figure, just apply Tammy Van Orman is the person who processes that in my office. Tammy is great. And she'll be able to help people through that. You know, I'd rather have someone apply and have us deny them an exemption than to find out later that they could have been part of that exemption going forward. And there's a lot of other nuances of what income is. So that's why I just say, file, let Tammy look at it, and we'll take another look at it. There's exemptions for veterans who served during a period of conflict. That's probably the exemption that the most eligible people don't sign up for. And I always yell at our veterans or our people who served and say, you know, the exemption is there for your benefit. I know and I appreciate that you served without wanting that benefit, but it's there, take it. So we try to get people signed up. And now that we do have a veteran service agency coordinator,
J.R. Claiborne.
J.R. Claiborne, yeah. So it's great to see him there to try to help get the word out. But, you know, that's one of the, you know, the way I look at these exemptions, you have exemptions based upon need and exemptions based upon who you are. And the low income senior is based upon need. The veteran is more based upon who you are and what you did. But we have about, I think, 15,000 exemptions that we still administer each year. Another popular one is the STAR exemption, the school tax relief. That's gotten even more complicated since 2015. So if you're a new homeowner since 2015, the state makes you sign up for the STAR check credit. It's about the same savings, but for me, who have owned my house since 07, 08, somewhere around there, I think, I still get the STAR exemption savings on my tax bill. But if you're a new owner, you get it through the STAR check credit. It's actually an accelerated personal income tax credit. So in the eyes of New York State, it's income that they're not receiving. It is not spending. And when it's not spending, they can then not spend that money and call it not spending so that they can stay under their 2% spending cap. Governor Cuomo had very good accountants on there in order to make that. For me, if I don't get $200 to spend, it's the same as not spending $200. It doesn't comprehend. But in addition to that, it just makes it more difficult because that's also part of the income tax now. So I don't get as much information as I used to get from New York State about those. So I still know who's going to get the break on their tax bill. But those STAR check credit recipients, New York State notifies me in August of some of them, and New York State just sends a check to them. New York State doesn't tell me how big the check is. So ideally, it should be about the same. The state has made some changes to make it even more incomprehensible for me to explain, in that the STAR check credit checks could actually go up 2% per year in savings. Your STAR exemption won't go up again. I think last year in Lansing, where I live, I could have got $7 more if I went to the check program. But I would have had to pay $50 more a month in my escrow payment to make up for that $600 STAR savings. And then I would get the $600 check in September. So it's kind of like a Christmas club, you know, if I were to do that, spend a little more and get a little check there at the end. I'm not doing anything for $7. My luck, as soon as I did that, it would go back and it wouldn't have any additional savings in that check. And I'd just be out $50 more a month right now. So we'll kind of see where that goes. There really wasn't a significant change. Really about the only one that I would say would benefit would be seniors in the in the Spencer Van Etten School District. And there's an odd explanation for that. When they did that, the state changed how they look at oil and gas wells, and the town of Erin had a real dramatic shift and caused all sorts of headaches. So that would be the one senior that I would say to shift. But other than that, you know, it's really a personal decision. Does a senior who probably gets $1,000 off for their enhanced star, do they have that extra $1,000 in case New York State doesn't mail the tax bill in time? So that's kind of where that decision's made. I know one of our former county legislators switched over to the check. She should have gotten in October, and I think she ended up getting it in March. So she was out 5 months for that $1,000 check. Luckily, it didn't matter to her, but you know, that could make a lot of difference to a lot of our homeowners here. So that's where there's so many nuances to it and so many people specific things on that it's really hard to make a recommendation as to what someone should do. It's really a personal decision, and we'll walk people through it and kind of say, this is what you could have received last year if you had that ability. Let me see. So, you know, obviously it's not me doing all of this work. I have 2 office staff individuals here, Tammy Van Orman, Amy Cooper, absolutely great, you know, to deal with 3 phone line coming in, 2 public computers, and be able to actually do some work in the office. I don't know how they do it in the front office. I can't. When I go sit out there, I end up talking to people too long. So I can't get anything done. So I try to stay here, but I love picking up the phone. I have my assistant director, Irene Keogh, who pretty much does everything. Bang Zyroth is my commercial valuation specialist. And then I have 6 appraisers, Steve Lair, Carrie Field, Tyler Lawrence, Ezra Nakorntab, David Ogden, and Heather Richway. I can't say enough about our staff here, but that's because we have this consolidated office. You know, I've been able to hire 4 new people since 2000. We had 3 people retire at the end of 2000, 2 moved to other county departments. So I was able to rehire 4 people for the 5 people that left. And I can't say enough about them. They're great. They're going to be great contributors to this office. But luckily here, we can bring in kind of green people without the experience and be able to train them. Most other assessors, you know, if you went down to the town of Candor, you're not going to be able to fund a person for that succession training to be able to step right in. So we're very fortunate with that. I think that's kind of my general overview. Well, the one, you know, I will talk about the review process. So what happens is we do all of our work, and then on May 1, we release what's called the tentative assessment roll. And at that point, I am no longer legally able to change that assessment roll. I don't have that authority. That authority rests with the Board of Assessment Review. So the county legislature appoints a review board, and they serve 5-year terms. So right now we have Martha Preston, who was a retired mortgage originator from CFCU. We have Edie Spalding, who's a realtor with Howard Hanna. And then we have Mike Cannon, who was a commercial lender with the Tompkins County Trust Company. I still call it TCTC. I kind of went into TTC. I will not call it the Tompkins Community Bank. That just doesn't sound right. So I'm still old school in what I call some things around here in Ithaca. But those 3 people are absolutely incredible. We do also appoint 6 temporary hearing panels so that we can have a commercial review board, an urban review board, and a rural review board as well. So the quality of individuals that we have that are willing to serve on these review boards is, to me, is just a reflection of Ithaca and Tompkins County. We have incredible people here. And I don't know if we kind of know that. Nobel Prize winners, finalists, leaders in industry and arts, and it's really just we're unique here in Ithaca, and I think sometimes we kind of lose that kind of perspective. I know when I'm in golf league at Cornell, some of the professors that I'm playing with are just brilliant, and it really contributes to what we have here. But that review board then will look at what's called a grievance. If someone disagrees with their value, they'll file a grievance with that independent board, and that independent board will then kind of rule on that. After that, you could, I don't like our terminology, we have a grievance. And then after that, you could go to a SCAR, or a small claims assessment review. So it's kind of a pseudo judicial hearing to where a judicial officer is appointed, and rather than having to go to court, you can kind of do a small claims proceeding. For the bigger commercial properties, they do end up suing me in Supreme Court. I probably have around 15 to 20 properties right now that are suing me in Supreme Court. Pretty much any ambulance chaser attorney downstate will file on any property they can across the state in the hopes of getting a reduction. But, luckily we have the support here that if our value is right, I'll defend it. If our value is wrong, we'll correct it. None of my staff works on commission. I can say for, 52 and a half years, when Franklin in this office, either my dad or me, we've never had an instance of a politician trying to influence our value. And that is one of the greatest things of my office. I wouldn't do this job somewhere else because of the support I have at county administration, county legislator, and all of the town boards. I work closely with the town supervisors. I would think all of them appreciate the work that we do here. We're not perfect. We try getting better each year, and we are public servants, so hopefully we can serve you all in the manner that you should. But that's pretty much what I got. Any questions? Anything else you want me to elaborate on?
Well, I have one question, well, actually two, but the first one is, it sounds, you said that the assessments are based on, what's being paid for houses in that area. And I'm just wondering, so if like the town, if the country goes into recession and the value of houses drop, then do you lower the assessments at that point in time?
Yes, we will be more than happy to. We did that back in the 90s. We did a revaluation in 1990, and that was right when the last bubble burst in the real estate market. From 1990 through 1997, the taxable value in the city of Ithaca dropped every year but one. So we reduced those values.
Mhm.
It's I'm excited to do that because we've been in 20 years of a market that has been slowly appreciating here. And I think people forget that we will reduce assessments. We don't work on commission, so I would love to do that. The only reason that I wouldn't want to do that is my house is my biggest investment as a civil servant outside of my pension. I don't want to see my biggest investment go down in value. So I kind of don't want to see that, but in a weirdly professional manner, I would love to see that, just so that we could show that, yes, wherever values go, so do our values. And each year there is small areas that do see a decrease. This last year, I reduced all of our hotels. With COVID, the amount of travel that was happening, they saw their occupancy rates devastated and their income devastated. So those were a market area that saw a decrease, even while other areas were seeing an increase.
And I'm not clear about this. From I sort of understood that like the denser an area gets with population, the bigger the tax base. So that should lower people's rents. Like we live on North Side and there's a whole lot of construction going on and, you know, a lot of new housing being built there. So presumably since, you know, it's being spread over, you know, a bigger tax base, then people in the North Side should be paying a little less tax or no?
Mhm. Well, it's, the tax wouldn't be determined by your neighborhood. It would be more general by that taxing jurisdiction. So as more development happened in the city has a bigger base in order to distribute those taxes over.
Right.
So the tax bill should go down. The only problem that's happening now in the city is all of these new construction projects are getting a tax abatement. So you're not going to see that increase in the tax base at least until 10 years or even further out, depending upon that tax abatement. So yeah, as you know, as our tax base grows, you know, if our tax base doubled because of IBM putting a new plan in or Amazon putting something in, just for sake of, you know, we're not all of a sudden going to have to double our spending on schools or our spending on police or spending on healthcare, you know, things like that. You know, there may be some incremental costs, but you know, adding new lumber, adding new construction just spreads that out so that the tax rate could come down and those taxing jurisdictions generate the same amount of money. So you are correct in theory. The only kind of hiccup in it is that every piece of new construction we have in the flat areas of the city gets a tax abatement.
Right, and so that explains why my taxes went up 33.33%
Mhm.
in 1 year. Yeah.
I think Francine's got a question now.
Yes, hello, and thank you for being here today. Can you explain the partial tax property for real property exemption? And is that different from the enhanced star? Is enhanced star for school taxes?
Yep. So the enhanced star is just almost a doubling of the basic star. It's kind of a little more. So it's just off of your school taxes. As long as an owner is 65 years of age, their income is under, I want to say 91,000 this next year, they could receive about a $71,000 reduction in their taxable value for school purposes.
Okay.
So for, you know, Ithaca, that would save you about $1,000. I think it was $970 some last year, give or take. So that's kind of the enhanced star. Now, the partial tax exemption for senior citizens with limited income. As of right now, each school, town, county, village has a different income scale. But the city school district, and the county all have adopted the maximum scale as outlined by New York State. So that's if your income is under $29,000, you can get a 50% break in your taxes
Mhm.
for all three of those tax purposes. So if your house was worth 200,000, it would then be worth only 100,000 for town, county, or town, city, county, and school purposes. But your school would then be further reduced by that enhanced star.
Okay.
So it would go from $100,000, subtract 71,000 off of it, and then your house would only be worth $29,000 for school purposes. So
Mhm.
provides a pretty big exemption. We have about 2,000, I think, low-income seniors that have to apply each and every year because it's based upon income.
Oh,
And, you know, $1,000 difference in income is a 5% difference in exemption amount. So unfortunately, I've had seniors who have worked, they said, oh, you know, I worked a little bit more at this job, but that little bit more work caused their income to go up a little bit more, which
Mhm.
caused them to miss out on their exemption, which caused their taxes to be more than the amount of money that they made on that little bit of work that they did.
Mhm. So I'm waiting. I retired in the fall of 2020. And I've been waiting to apply for this partial tax exemption for real property for seniors.
Yep.
Because what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it will be based on my income from 2021. So if I had applied last year, it would have included, or this year, it would have included my income from when I was working. So is it correct that I should wait to apply this tax year for this partial tax exemption for real property?
Yep.
Do
Yep,
I
and-
submit that after I submit my taxes for this year, or it's based on 2020 income tax?
Yep, so the 2022 exemption roll that we're just in the process of filing,
Mhm.
the income tax year that we look at is 2020. So
2020.
the state kind of changed how we looked at that. In the past, we were able to look at 2021 because Tammy's great. And, you know, it gets into the deadline. So the deadline to apply for an exemption is March 1. The deadline to file your income tax is April 15th.
Mhm.
So we would always tell people, file your application, send us your income tax return. We can combine those in our office, and then we can make sure that we have your most up-to-date income. New York State said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're saying rather than the most recent income tax return that you filed, it's 2 years back.
Okay.
So, yeah, so, but what I would suggest, and I don't know about you, but I always kind of forget things. Apply now.
Oh,
We have it in our records, you're in our system. If something happens to you in February, you know, don't put off tomorrow what you can do today. It's so easy to say that, you know, but kind of impossible to do that. But yeah, you know, you probably have your 2021 income tax return done. You know,
Mhm.
all we need is a driver's license, a passport, birth certificate, something to show that you're 65. That income, the application, we'll put it in our pending folder and you'll be good to go. There's no use waiting. Do you have an application yet?
Oh, yes,
Okay,
I filled up my application in 2020 or so, and then I realized that it would be looking at income that I made when I was working, and
Yeah.
now I'm on a fixed income. Yeah, I'm really concerned about what's going on in the city. You know, it's lovely. It's lovely to see all the development. But for seniors like me who plan to stay, we're not planning to sell our homes. I'm trying to wrap my head around for people who are on a fixed income to be able to pay all this tax, because you have folks that love Ithaca, they want to come in and they're willing to pay $500,000 for a 3-bedroom, one bath home. It just seems it's really unfair. I mean, it's nice to see the market and neighborhoods improve, but we talk about systematic racism or classism. It is alive when you look at what's happening in the housing market in Ithaca. So I hope that your office and other planners are looking at ways to try to retain good citizens, senior citizens in the city, and not run us out, because that's crazy. You know, it's just a crazy amount of money. And then it may be the flood insurance thing that's coming up. So
yep,
that's
that was one thing I was gonna point out. The flood insurance thing scares me the most. Because the areas that are gonna be added are some of our more lower valued neighborhoods within the city. And from when we saw that in the 80s, we saw Willow Ave and Lake Ave turn into more of a rental neighborhood than an owner occupied neighborhood. Because those landlords didn't need to have a federally insured mortgage and have to pay flood insurance. They were able to buy it with, you know, their own money or mortgage a property outside of it. those new flood maps have the potential to devastate the city. I don't like it, and I hope the city does something about it. I know our county planning department has said it's a city of Ithaca issue. To me, it's a bigger community issue. And we should have never let FEMA come in and do those maps. Because the money for those flood insurance isn't going to go to Tompkins County or the city of Ithaca. All of that flood insurance money is going to go to the coast. It's going to go to Florida. It's going to pay those claims. If you look at the flood insurance and what's happening in Florida now, there are no private insurance down there. Private insurance doesn't want to pay on properties that are going to flood. So they're going to cherry pick the properties that are not going to flood. And it's going to be up to FEMA to insure those. And that's where our money is going to end up going. You know, the couple $1 million a year that I'm anticipating that flood insurance would be is going to go to Florida or New Orleans and go to their floodgates, and we'll be stuck here on our own. But that's more of my kind of editorial than an official position, but that has me worried. As soon as I saw those maps up, I called up everybody. Called up Sally Hoyt at the trust company, the flood queen. Sally would be a great person to come talk, Zach, on that. Sally's just incredible. And that's an issue that has me scared.
From
Mainly
Tompkins
because
Trust?
yes. Yeah, you know, mainly I have a lot of friends, you know, I grew up in the city, went to Boynton, went to IHS, and, you know, a lot of my friends' parents still live in those neighborhoods, and I just worry about them. And I don't, you know, I know they're already on that low income senior. We got that. Luckily, the state did allow for an increase in exemption limits on that. So maybe we can get that 50% break from 29 up closer to 50 that the state maximum is now. So hopefully Governor Hochul will sign that, and then I can bring that to the county and then the city and the school to try to raise those exemption limits. So we're working on things. Hopefully they'll be coming quick enough to provide the relief that we need.
Leslie, Priscilla, any questions you want to jump in with?
No, you answered everything beautifully. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I can say is, you know, if you have questions, come and talk to us. You know, we're not mean. You know, this is, you know, I started off, it is at family office. You know, we stress public service. That's why we're here. You know, we're here to serve. If you want to come visit us, do it before 9 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to pay for parking. You know, parking's widely available for us. We'll get you in and out 10, 15 minutes max. You know, we always tell people, you know, I've never used one of those parking machines, and I never will. I know enough hidden parking spaces around Ithaca here that I can find something.
I had a question. I'm curious about strategies for keeping assessments low. I hear people doing, or I see and hear people not maintaining the outside of homes, like limiting landscaping. Does that type of thing, is that likely to keep the assessment low? And if you're appealing something, is making a point of major repairs that have been left out, does that stuff influence things low?
I mean, you know, we're trying to determine the market value of the property. So a lot of the times what people think may affect value doesn't really affect the value in the grand scheme of things when someone's looking at it. So someone, oh, my house isn't done. I don't have this piece of trim work. Well, that piece of trim is probably going to cost you $15 and 10 minutes to put in. So it's not like a $20,000 reduction in your property value. So, you know, one of my favorite sayings is nothing is ever as great as it seems, and nothing is ever as bad as it seems. Everything kind of comes to that middle there. So, I mean, and to keep values low, you know, we kind of know people, we kind of know their tricks. And, we can kind of see, oh yeah, they don't keep their outside as updated. We may say, all right, probably not as good inside, we make a lower reduction. But I guarantee you, when their neighbor comes in to contest their assessment, they're gonna point out your property and say, hey, that person has a whole finished basement, they just remodeled their kitchen, you don't know about it. And then we say, all right, let's go out and take a look at that. So your neighbors will sell you out in a blink of an eye if they think that it can help you out. We don't take them at 100%, but we do investigate. But there is kind of that dual-edged sword. The more well you maintain your property, the more value it has, the more in taxes you have to pay. The county and the city does offer a capital improvements to residential properties that if you do work to your house and it raises the value, they will phase in that value over an 8-year period. So if it raises your value by $80,000, you will get that fully off of your assessment in year 1. And then you'll have a 12.5% exemption or 87.5% exemption in year 1. So you'd have a $70,000 exemption and only pay taxes on a $10,000 increase. So there is a program that kind of offsets people doing work to their house. But, it takes, I don't know, I kind of like having nice landscaping and enjoying the house that I live in. I've already said it's my biggest investment. So, there may be people who want to play that game, but there's also enough people that take pride in their ownership. And, you're really only hurting yourself because, in the grand scheme of things, you're looking at a couple $100 maybe in tax savings with a condition issue. Granted, for some people that is an issue, but in overall, the enjoyment that you get out of having a nice landscaped yard and house and condition outweighs that kind of savings.
I just have one last question. When we were looking at the assessments in the area around where I live, I noticed that some of the people who were landlords in fairly large rental properties, there wasn't any information about their assessment. And I was just curious why that was. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't find out how much their property was being assessed for.
The only thing, I mean, all of our records are posted online. The only thing I could think of on a larger property, it may have multiple addresses. So it may be a 212 through 214 North Cuga Street and would, have a hard time looking up. It may have frontage on multiple streets and everybody may think that, oh, that's really on Buffalo Street, but we have it on a Plain Street address. So, everything's there. We don't hide any properties. So, we do look at a little bit differences in how we value income producing properties versus homes. There's 3 different approaches to value. The cost approach, how much would it cost you to rebuild that property? No, you're not going to pay more for a property that exists if you could build the same thing for less price. Sales comparison, we talked about those apples. But then there's also the income approach. So if you're going to receive $100,000 worth of income each year from this property, you're probably willing to pay somewhere around $1 million for that $100,000 a year income stream. So that's kind of where that income approach to looks at, what's the net present value of future income streams out 20 years. So that's kind of really only that difference in commercial properties. But even then in commercial properties, some of the sales we're seeing are just absolutely ridiculous. The new city center building, they built it for 50 million and they sold it for 75 million.
Yes. Well, but then it's funny because I always walk up University and there's 4 apartment buildings that have been for sale for over a year on University. It's just,
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's a little less location as they've kind of densified College Town. College kids are lazy and don't like to walk uphill, especially to class. From what they'll walk uphill back home, but when they want to go to class, they want to walk downhill. Just kind of seems odd. So that, and especially when they built the new dorms over there, it kind of shifted the focus of campus to more uphill than downhill.
but if I guess if you live at city center, you've got to go uphill pretty far. I guess you take a bus.
Yeah, and that even though that still has a tax abatement. So to me, if you build something for 50 million, you sell it for 75 million, there is no financial need in order to have that abatement. The city, the county, and the school district simply gave away millions of dollars to an out-of-state developer for them to make $25 million.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your input. Thank you.
So I want to have one last question. Just you mentioned there's the something you touched on before. I mentioned about the timetable for the seniors to come in to the office to request the abatement. I do a newsletter every month with the calendar that I put out, and it would be a good point for me to include. So is it March 1 that you were saying that they should be in by?
Yes, yeah. Yep, all applications have to be due by March 1. That's called our taxable status date.
Okay,
Kind of
so
like the
February,
golden day.
actually January would probably be the time for me to start putting in
Yeah, and
Well,
people's
I
eyes.
think December 17th this year, where's my calendar? Yeah, December 16th this year is when we mail out renewal applications. So every senior who received an exemption on the current assessment roll, we send out a pre-filled renewal application. We have pop-up boxes. Hey, we've already received your 2021 income because you came in, you did it. You don't need to do it. Just sign the application and send it. Or we don't have your 2021, send it. So we try to make it as easy so a person only has to sign the application when they get it.
Okay,
So, but Zach, as he told Francine, maybe you should send it now so everybody who has filed their 2021 taxes could do the same thing. Send it in now and he'll put it in the pending file. So it might not hurt to do it right at the moment.
why wait? Why wait
Why
for tomorrow?
wait,
What you
like,
can do
and
for
then
today?
send a reminder in February
Yeah,
or January.
yeah, the only problem with that is people would then try to apply and think that it would be on their school tax bill coming up. So there is a problem with having everybody come in early. Because they may think they could get the exemption early. It's kind of the one-offs of, hey, don't wait and come on in. But for those renewals, it's almost easier to wait. But we do have a list of snowbirds that head down to Florida. And before they head down, they'll typically come in, we'll print off that renewal application, they'll sign it. So, it's kind of let the process play out unless you have something different, and then we'll work with you. But yeah, call us before March 1, call us in February. Like I said, make me your Valentine.
All right, and this is the RP 467, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then, we're government, we need more forms. So as long with the 467, we'll need the 425E and the 425 IDP.
What percentage of appeals are successful?
Yeah, that's a good question and one that I've never looked at. And the reason I haven't looked at it is because any appeal that is good is granted. So, we're not always working with complete information, even by the time that someone is going to grieve their assessment. So at that point, you know, if someone said, oh, hey, we had just had grievance day and we had a person who had 2 bathrooms in their basement that they had taken out. Well, that kind of changes their 5-bedroom, 4-bath house to a 5-bedroom, 2-bath house. So with that new information, we're able to then be able to more accurately value that piece of property. So, that's where we get back to, we'll defend a right value, but we won't defend an incorrect value. So, if we have the correct information, and that's another thing, when you have 2 appraisers, they're probably going to give 2 different values on a piece of property. Hopefully they'll be close because it's that art and a science. So I could go out and say, oh, I think your house is worth 250. Someone else could go out and say, I think it's worth 230 or 270. So there's always a range of error. And, because the real estate market is not a perfect market, people's feelings come into play. When you go to buy a piece of property, it's not set in stone. It's not a fixed market. It's not like gas prices. Regardless of where you go, you're going to pay $4.99 for gas. So there is kind of that range already. And with the crazy market we're seeing, there's even a bigger range right now. So that's kind of where I've never looked at it, because I don't want to say, yep, that was a reduction granted. But it was a reduction granted because we found out that the garage was torn down and the house was gutted. So, it's kind of hard to distinguish that.
Well, Jay, thank you so much. Really interesting session. It was a really great
Thank you.
explanation. So thanks for taking the time, and at some point it might be fun to check back with you, but
Oh, no problem.
What a
I'll
great
be here
session.
for the next 6 years, 2 months and 11 days. So
wow.
not that we're counting or anything, but
And do you have another Franklin to take over?
well, I do. That's what my son was like. So I guess I'm going to be working in your office. I'm like, no, Troy, you can go do whatever you want. And I'm like, but maybe one of my girls would do so. I had the 1 boy and 2 girls out of the triplets.
So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
All
Thank you
right,
again.
take care,
Bye-bye.
all. Let me know if you can do something.